Good evening, everybody. Let us bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for bringing us here to this meeting of the St. Lucie branch of the Democratic Labour Party constituency here in Barbados. We want to thank you for being the good God that you are to us. You've led us and you continue to lead us. As we open this meeting this evening, Father, we pray that your spirit will be with us. May everything be done to your name's honor and glory. Give the speakers an unction that they will present the issues that face this country in a way that will convince and convict men that there is time in this country for a different direction. As we continue to serve this community in this particular part of Barbados, may we do so recognizing that you've led us in the past, you've given us victory then, and you will give us in the future. Guide and direct. Remember our party president and the candidate who have to present this evening in a special way. Remember all the other members of this party and the leaders in their respective capacities. Guide and direct, we pray, in the proceedings in Jesus' name. Amen. Be seated. Good evening, everybody. We want to thank you for coming in what we have to consider a new norm. But despite the challenges that the pandemic confront us in our country, as a party, as a branch in the St. Lucie constituency, we continue to strive to be with our constituents, be with the members of our communities, and to lead and keep the issues that confront them in the forefront. This evening, I will ask the members to forego the normal household issues. So we will waive on our meeting minutes for the last meeting, as we have a program, given the time, given the protocols, and given the challenges that we have, we will try to get ahead and do the business at hand. This evening in particular, we are happy to have to accompany our candidate for St. Lucie, our president, Madam Verla de Pisa, to address us, Mr. Kimar Stewart. Last Sunday, I had the distinct privilege of following the meeting in St. Andrew, and I was quite impressed with his presentation then. And that is not the reason why we chose him, but I'm telling you that what we saw then tells us that if the constituents in the constituency of Bridgetown, the city, are smart, they will grab this opportunity to send this young man to the House of Assembly. Now, Kimar is a young man. He served this party for a short period of time as the General Secretary. Then but before that, he was educated at the St. Michael Secondary School, the Barbados Community College Institute of Hospitality, where he did an associate degree in tourism and travel. It's while working in this sector that he enrolled at the KFL campus of the University of the West Indies, and he completed a bachelor's degree in economics, specializing in banking and finance. This evening, Kimar wants to give us a new perspective, brings us concept, new perspective on the economy and other economic and financial issues facing the country. So, without any further ado, I want you to welcome Mr. Kimar Stewart to the podium.
Good evening to St. Lucie. I thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope very much that you enjoy my presentation. So good evening again to everyone present. Good evening to everyone watching online. I'm very happy that you taken your evening to be with us in the Democratic Labour Party. I'd like to say good evening to the president of the party and to former cabinet members and all residents of St. Lucie who took the time to be here this evening. So let's get right into this evening's presentation. I am here to address this evening's meeting live at St. Clement's Church Hall in support of Verla de Pisa, the president and the candidate for St. Lucie. And tonight it will give a fresh perspective on the political economy of Barbados, both locally, regionally, and internationally. by highlighting the parliamentary thrust that this country has taken since 2018. Since the Barbados Labour Party would have came to office, the political economy of Barbados has undergone many disruptive changes. Under the IMF endorsed BERT plan, many of the social institutions in Barbados has been faced with instructions to do business in a completely foreign way, which is causing serious destructive effects across the public service of Barbados to levels never seen before. As far back as former Prime Minister Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, the International Monetary Fund would have suggested that government is too big of an employer. And the then DLP government would have decided to implement an 8% wage cut across the board in order to save this economy back in 1991. Those who would have been born then can tell me the stories. I would have not been born, so I can't tell you. I can only tell you about my research and what I found. So I'm very happy to hear of the experiences subtype from the board's senior members. When the former Prime Minister Onafa came to power in 1994 through 2008, his mantra was jobs number one is jobs. And the Barbados Labour Party would have led a massive increase in the public service of Barbados using borrowed monies from international private banks. Not speaking about the IMF and the World Bank and those persons, I'm talking about international private banks. And they would have borrowed that money at some very high interest rates. Now, if y'all can recall, the Barbados Labour Party has some challenges with the international creditors, who's represented by the Lil Worrell. And the same loans that they would have borrowed when they were in office, they had challenges to try to restructure these same loans when they came into office and implemented debt restructuring. So when I saw the creditors and Mia Motley fighting, I was like, yes, chickens came home to roost. Because she, and going after Law rest his soul, they were responsible for a lot in Barbados that needs to be brought to light as it relates to the economic management of this country. Again, touching on the last Democratic Labour Party government, they would have made a sacrificial choice in printing monies at our local central bank to keep public workers employed, which is very commendable. They did not take the route that the Barbados Labour Party took in going cap in hand to the IMF. I was so ironic about that. The ambassador to CARICOM, who is David Commission, he was very opposed to the IMF before the election of the Barbados Labour Party to office. After they have been elected to office, he is the happiest cheerleader in the camp. And moving on, this country, who once enjoyed freedom, is now buried firmly into the hands of the International Monetary Fund, with the survival of Barbadians dependent on meeting unrealistic and misfit targets. That's very painful to bear on the lower middle classes in this country, because so far all we've seen is the protection of the upper classes, support and continued being of them, but tax increases for us. And I would encourage you to pay attention as to who supports you, which party supports the lower classes in this country. So far, the BLP and the International Monetary Fund has had its eyes on the public service again. And they would have agreed since 2018 to cut the wage bill in this country. You've seen a headline on Barbados today where people were sent home in the first round of retrenchments. We didn't hear much noise about that. There was not much banter and chat about that, because I realized that the Prime Minister is allowed to do things in Barbados and escape scrutiny. and had somebody else said what she says on a daily basis or do what she does, people will curse them all across Barbados. Well, I don't know about y'all, but that rant that occurred on Brass Stacks on Monday, I will have something to say about that. And when the president comes, she will have something to say about that as well. But in moving on, the changes that has occurred in this country under this International Monetary Fund program has completely changed the way how government is run and has crippled our ability and government's ability to be the driver of any job-led growth in Barbados. I mean, Motley must be taken to task for giving false hopes that Barbados can provide 20,000 jobs under this Job and Investment Council, the same one that George Payne stood up in Parliament and cursed Mia Motley about and told her that she should apologize to the public for spreading propaganda on people. Many of the political jobs which we are seeing being splashed all over, job for you, Steve, job for you, Shaquani, job for you, Adrian, job for you only if you are a Barbados Labour Party member and a consultant. Because since they came to office, we are now seeing a consultant economy. I believe in Barbados that one of the best political decisions that Mia Motley made was to move Liz Thompson from TV. I believe that giving her a job was a direct waste of money. Because I always thought to myself, sometimes she sounds so stupid up there talking about my condolences. And I am eagle-eared. For the life of me, oh my God. I always knew Liz Thompson was a condolence. See you, and tonight I would not go any further. I will leave it as that. But again, I applaud the Prime Minister for doing that. And now there's David Ellis. I believe that David Ellis and the appointment of his job was a slap in the face of public servants who could have done that job. And there was no reason for Mia Motley to throw him a $15,000 a month bone for him to come on TV and say the same things that a public servant could have said. And that is unfair. And the Democratic Labour Party needs to stand up and say when things are wrong in this country. Because again, they're just splashing money over here, splashing money over there, job for you, consultancy for you. But the people of Barbados are being left to suffer, and their party members are being rewarded with the biggest jobs. Just look at the establishment of the Public Affairs Department, and you will see all of their party members in there enjoying the perks and the benefits. Well, the average Barbadian sucks salt on a daily basis. You are afforded the courtesy of just a care package, but as it relates to having gainful employment in this country, nothing is being said or put in place for us to benefit. I will go on to state that some time ago, the Barbados Labour Party would have taken or made some changes to the town and country planning legislation. The intention of this legislation was to put the chief town planner in a speedier rhythm as it relates to making decisions on some construction projects. Where the Barbados Labour Party went wrong, and they always go wrong, is that they tried to pass this law that you have to move out of your house in order to do renovations. What type of is that? How can you look at a country like Barbados and say to them, in order to put up a board or put in a window, you have to move out of your house? The policy was removed, pulled back, rightly so, because it was very unpopular. And the person who conceived of the idea did not think it through. In another situation where we required a speedier approach to governance, the Barbados Labour Party, again, commandeered Ms. Ramsland under the Compulsory Acquisition Act, which was indeed an abuse of political power. Still, after all of this time, the Hayat still has not gone up. And again, Mr. Commission, after mounting his legal challenges, caused a 2-year delay in securing approval for the project. He's not taking so much an interest in the Hayat anymore, but it still has not gone up. And I can remember they're promising the people in the city of Bridgetown opportunities to work at the Hayat. They promised the residents of the city that they can set up entrepreneurship opportunities. And still today, nothing has happened. I will continue to state that the recent spat between the Minister of Housing, Dr. Tugid, and the importation of the Chinese houses. My comment simply is that if an educated Barbadian working in this country cannot contribute his opinion, his professional opinion, without facing attacks from people like Mr. Dugid, a government minister who should know better, then I don't know where we're heading. This is akin to dictatorship type tendencies, where innocent citizens cannot put forward their educated opinions on problems that would cost the government money. And I think that that is wrong. I believe that in Barbados, in order for us to increase the standards of government, the Democratic Labour Party must put policies in place and incentives for the civil service to be 21st century viable. Where things like increases in wages for teachers, nurses, police, the army, immigration, based on merit-based promotions, and not due to the fact that you support the Barbados Labour Party, because there are many non-partisan persons in Barbados working in the civil service who has to bear the brunt of this type of discrimination where they are qualified but sidestepped because they do not support the Barbados Labour Party. And the Democratic Labour Party must move to change that and to incentivize particularly young persons to come into the civil service. I believe that the closure of the Barbados Productivity Council was a very backward step, and that it must be reestablished or the launch of a new type of institution to measure how effective the government is being managed in this country. Because if we continue to wait on institutions such as the IMF, such as the World Bank and the OECD to tell us how good we are doing and how bad we are doing, we are going to have to continue to bow to their feet. And I believe it's time, even that Barbados is shaping a new identity and going republic, that we look at these type of ideas and initiatives to move this country from out under the thumb of the International Monetary Fund. I also believe that the continued squeezing of this country to meet these IMF targets is a very easy thing for the Barbados Labour Party and the Burke Monitoring Committee to say. But when it comes to the massive cut into the lifestyle of Barbadians, this has potential to disrupt this country and break the backbone of the middle class, leaving Barbadians to face a cold winter. And I believe that the Democratic Labour Party's role is to step forward like they have traditionally done and put policies in place to protect the middle and lower classes in this country. Because the displacement of what you would call traditional government jobs and the perceived benefits that are associated with government jobs, we are basically at the end of our life as it relates to that. And again, I'm going to knock the government for promising Barbadians 20,000 jobs when they know full well that the government cannot economically, financially, politically add 20,000 people anywhere in this country, public sector, private sector, because they did something to the private sector in Barbados that I don't think we paid significant attention to, where they would have cut the amount of subsidies available, because when you subsidize investment, you look all around the Caribbean governments, or I should say the private sector, relies on Caribbean governments to shoulder them as it relates to investments. And under the International Monetary Fund program, Barbados would have cut the amount of subsidies available, and our private sector is not one that takes many risks. So they are going to have to step up to the plate and lead any potential job growth in this country, because the government simply cannot do it. In moving on, I will state that the Barbados Labour Party has put forward some legislative changes which would allow for a circumvention of some of our legal processes, both within the parliament and within the private sector, or just to say the public sector, sorry. Because if you look at this work plan, which they constantly remind us it is not the IMF's program, they say it is our program, that Barbados brought it to them, and they just agreed. I can recall the Prime Minister saying that Bert was prepared at least 2 years before the election. And they pulled short and pulled short and pulled short. Did not say to Barbadians that they were going to the IMF. The Democratic Labour Party was on record stating that they are not going to the IMF. And I believe had they declared that they were going to the IMF, Barbadians would have certainly voted different. Because they sat down and negotiated under this work plan serious cuts to the wage bill of this country. And we all know what that means, sending home Barbadians. And how do you send home people in a pandemic? The household mitigation unit can't do all. The unemployment checks, they run out. The care packages, they're gone. So what are you left to do in Barbados? And this is a void that the Democratic Labour Party has to face, to inspire and to encourage its citizens in areas like entrepreneurship. Because as we can see, the institutions that were once available to us, our government institutions, our state-owned enterprises, have been placed firmly on the chopping block of the IMF. But still no conversation, no detailed conversation as it relates to this work plan. But we've been promised that we're going to come out, it's all fine and dandy, and it is all well. But I would challenge the Barbados Labour Party to tell us the truth, because the Democratic Labour Party will put their points forward so that Barbadians understand the economy from our perspective. Earlier in my presentation, I would have mentioned the consultant economy. And I would have mentioned the wastage associated with these consultants who can't seem to get anything right, who can't seem to get the job done. And as soon as you say anything that can potentially bring any damage to the Barbados Labour Party, they move you and give you a promotion for failing. That's not my opinion. You can look around. We've had the Czar. We've had, again, Liz Thompson. We've had David Ellis. And yeah, you have the quote. I lost count now. I believe that in Barbados, the destruction of labor and workers' rights is well within the mandate of the Barbados Labour Party. Because I heard the Prime Minister say on broadcast that she's not going to call an election in a pandemic. So what happened in St. George North? You say, if you don't consider that an election, what was it? A coronation? Because, yes, you're coronated Princess Tony, but after that, I can. Residents of St. George are crying. Labor laws are being changed to suit big businesses in this country. And as the more time passes in Barbados, you're developing this anti-worker policy, disadvantaging the workers in this country, taking away their rights. I will go on to state that as something is not done as it relates to the protection of workers and the protection of jobs and adequate job security in Barbados, we are going to go back to the stages when people almost work for free. And that is not the model of Barbados. That was not the vision of the Right Excellent Earl Walton Barrow. And the onus is on Barbadians. And Madam President, I am challenging you to remind this country as to what Earl Barrow stood for. Because we are losing our way under this current government. You see, they're all over the world, all over the globe, hardly doing anything in Barbados and for Barbadians. Because the Prime Minister is doing more work for the United Nations than she is doing for this country. Before COVID, she was all over the world. She was out there with Aquaman. I don't know if y'all can remember that. We have a very big celebrity for a prime minister in this country. But she's almost next to Rihanna. She was even given the Diamond Award at Rihanna's ball. I can't remember. Do we need a leader who cares about the people of this country, or do we want a superstar whose interest is working in the United States and for the UN and for big countries? I am urging you to do some serious introspection because the time to vote is near in this country. No man only talk about no elections. As far as I can remember, nobody called for any election. No opposition member suggested anything about any election. But the Prime Minister came and said, oh, the oppositional parties, if they want an election, we can give them an election. Why does she insist on bluffing Barbadians like that? When me and nobody's afraid of you, call the election. Because the Democratic Labour Party is ready, and when Madam President comes, she will bring a greater understanding as to what we have to offer. As I go on, I will state that the Barbados economy, and just referencing again the last administration tried to protect Barbadians, tried to protect society, tried to keep society intact and away from the policies that the International Monetary Fund would put forward. But in hindsight, given that the Prime Minister was appointed to the International Monetary Fund's committee, chairing a World Bank and IMF committee, I think that the country was collateral damage in between for what the Prime Minister wants to achieve. So far, no tangible benefits has been derived from borrowing this money. So far, we're over $2 billion, and Barbados has seen no real investment, no easing of taxes, and the country continues to suffer. We had serious issues as it relates to the wage bill, and I would have mentioned it earlier. It was so bad that Kevin Greenidge and the Prime Minister came up with what they call the BOSS program. The BOSS program, for lack of better words, has been a serious failure. It has not reached the targets that it was intended to. The program started in July 2020, and it was intended to last 18 months, cutting the government's wage bill by $153 million, directing these funds into the same capital works projects that they spoke about. I ain't see the capital works projects. The workers' wages were cut. And most of them they enjoy the interest that they spoke about because when they wrote out these bonds and what's not, Restaurant said that the initial uptake was low. And that was in better times. He didn't account for the fact that we had this Hurricane Elsa and the cost of living and the curfews and the cutting of hours since they implemented the minimum wage. The fact that government workers still experience delays in payments, 2 and 3 and 4 months. And the likelihood that a worker will want to keep these bonds is not very high. And whenever they come and present it, because they have to present it soon, because the program is soon as an end, they will say, boss did not meet your expectations, but they're trying something to try to correct it. But the fact remains that under this International Monetary Fund program, we have to take dictates as it relates to reducing the income of our citizens, because the IMF does not believe really in supporting lower income individuals, cutting your pension, cutting your wages, cutting health care, cutting the education budget. Where is the social conscience of the Barbados Labour Party to sign up this country to something like that? The Democratic Labour Party understands where social investment is important. And the policies of the party needs to come to the forefront in targeting those persons who will be casualties under this program going forward. On to another state-owned enterprise, the Barbados Water Authority. Since this government came to power, the water woes in this country has taken a drastic turn for the worse. And you who are living in St. Lucie can tell me about the water. The people in St. George and St. John and St. Thomas can tell you about the water. Before I came here, I went to turn the pipe to wash my face and no water. How can we be a progressive country and simple things like running water does not happen every day? The firefighters came out and said that they didn't have the equipment. Teachers complain on a daily. This is before we didn't have any chalk. So I am saying to you, Barbadians, the state of this country and how the International Monetary Fund program is taking the clothes off your back. After you work so hard to get where you are, educated yourselves, educated your children, you'll be able to build a house, you drive a nice car, but all of that is slowly disappearing. And the government is doing nothing to stall the slide. I believe that within a short space of time, the Barbados Water Authority is going to go on the chopping block as a private entity in this country. They appointed 20 men to one committee to assist in managing the water challenges across Barbados. And the Minister of Water Resources, Charles Griffith, he did say that the committee is a public-private partnership. And that is always the first step into full privatization. I give it the fact that the Barbados Light and Power is seeking an increase. I also believe that with the disruptions that we face through the lockdowns and the curfews, that the Barbados Water Authority is going to come for an increase as well. Like water, telephone. Everything is going up in Barbados. The government is not doing anything to stop that slide, and I keep reminding you, pay attention to your own personal life. And tell me, are you not experiencing a serious downgrade in the quality of your life? Are things any better pre-2018, post-2018? The country is being filled with misery, and unrest is heading our way due to the cutbacks that are still due under the IMF program. I I'm going to come to the end of my presentation very soon. I have to make a couple of points before I leave. But I am of the opinion and of the fact that Barbados needs and the government needs to have a very serious conversation with this country as to the direction they want to take us outside of this International Monetary Fund program. The tourists are canceling their stays, so therefore tourism is not independent. So I am asking, what is your plan as it relates to rescuing us from the onslaught under this International Monetary Fund program? If we look into what is occurring, and if I can remember, there was a lady called Janice who had her pension cut last year. And she was protesting all around Bridgetown, saying that the government cut her pension and then they were forced to go and reinstate the pension. But within February 2020, the IMF announced that Barbados is in line for pension reform. And Kevin Greenwich came out and said that Barbados or the IMF is not responsible for the implementation of any pension program in Barbados. That the government of Barbados is the only body who's responsible for such, and that the IMF does not tell you what to do, that they only recommend. Now, I am asking a fair question as a citizen. If the government of Barbados takes a plan to the IMF that they do not agree with, are they going to certify this plan? Yes or no? My answer is simple no. So I am asking, why do we have these unelected consultants coming to Barbadians, seeking to mammogram us and turn our heads away from the impending, I would say, destruction that's heading our way, and the removal of and the enjoyment of a pension in Barbados? That I personally believe that I am not going to feel what it is like to experience a government pension, the way in which those things are going. Because the pension budget in this country is increasing by $36 million a year, and it is definitely on the chopping block for the IMF, and we need to pay serious attention to that. I believe that as we go through the pandemic, serious repercussions will be brought to bear, given that our education ministry is being managed so reckless and destructive that our literacy rate will go down. Because ask or do a survey, many parents in this country are saying that online is not working well for them. Many children still do not have tablets. Many children still do not have access to Wi-Fi. I can recall the government promised free Wi-Fi for the entire city of Bridgetown. We still did not hear anything or see anything about Wi-Fi. So I will wrap up on my final point. Even when we look to the level of CARICOM, Barbados is still experiencing serious challenges. LIAT, in its old form, was destroyed, which resulted in the grounding of that airplane for quite some time. And regional travel was seriously affected. If I can recall, there was a public spat between the shareholders, and again, present on the board is Mia's best friend, Double M. And it seems that everywhere this pier goes, it seems to be more and more problems for Barbadians. I will end by saying this. I believe that Barbados is facing an economic storm, but we can't come through it. We need to hold our hands together, put ideas together, form committees together, and I'm tasking the Democratic Labour Party to articulate policies and philosophies which would directly target the institutions that I would have raised, so that the effect and the fallout from these institutions eases the pain that will be coming soon in the country. And that the more the government wraps itself, into the International Monetary Fund, Barbados will have to pay more and more and sacrifice more and more till there's going to be a divide this big between the upper class and the lower class in Barbados. And the middle class of this country will be moved closer and closer and closer every year to oblivion. That there will now be poor people and rich people in Barbados. And that is not the Barbadian way. So I thank you very much for listening to my thought-provoking presentation. And I look forward to engaging you further as we move this journey forward. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Kimar. I'm sure that he deserves a bigger applause than that. Come on. Thank you very much for coming from the city where we promised to help you. We want to come up and give you a hand. We have friends in the city too. A lot of us have been around the city for a long time. I, like a good citizen in the country, Barbados, have a few concerns. And I'm not a speaker this evening. I'm just giving a preamble to what Madam President, I'm sure, will address in her presentation, our candidate for St. Lucie. But my major concern as a citizen has been how government has been handling our COVID-19 operatives and consultants. Kima raised some issues about it, which I wouldn't repeat, but we've seen it taken the toll of a minister who was decided long before the election is officially called that he is going. We've seen since the Barbados Labour Party come to power, the big plan gathering went scattering. We saw her global push only recommenced very recently with the United Nations UNCTAD conference here in Barbados, where she is seeking to elevate herself to numero uno among small island developing states across the world. Despite this country having serious challenges in terms of rampant reduction in our tourism arrivals, you would have seen it in the front page of the Nation today. I know a lot of you don't read it because you don't like scandal sheets, but that is a fact. Tourism arrivals are going to take a dip. And it's primarily because of the policies of this government in terms of how it has handled the whole COVID-19 exercise. If they were serious about the winter season, which is usually the biggest time of the year, when arrivals from time immemorial, the period November or December 15th to April 15th, they would have protected it by creating the type of buffer over the summer instead of trying to capture a few cheap tourists that came about here, and I would dare say brought some things that is now impacting on our country. But the pandemic, yes, is a worldwide phenomenon, and it has given us things like the highest unemployment ever in this country. Yes, we might not want to blame her, but it's a fact. I'm blaming her. What I want the government to do is tell us, how are you going to get us out of this high level of unemployment? How are you going to address the upward movement in high prices that is afflicting the man in the street, in the supermarkets and across the economic landscape? Gas stations, gas prices going up unrelenting. The electricity company now promising to give us an increase as well. Kimar mentioned the fact about water rates might go up, right? Then when you look at how the government has addressed its own presentation, if you look at it across the countries in the world, you will see leaders addressing their own personal cabinet and things like that. We have done nothing. Barbados has lived off the fat of borrowed money, and we have some incompetent ministers who are just getting paid not to perform. We have we so I would like to address the issue of all these consultants and what they're doing to address the myriad of problems that is facing our country, instead of just appointing more and more consultants who are only living off the fact. I saw an interesting ad quite recently, and it is telling us that we are going to have a new CEO for the BTMI Inc., a company, it's a government company. And I just saw some of the emoluments that will be going this person's way. It's amazing, it is amazing that at this time, in this juncture of our economic history, educational development, and things like that, that Barbados still look abroad to find employees or people to bring to this country to lead some of our major institutions. I am not one to say that Barbadians don't find work abroad. I know about that personally and directly. I worked for the Commonwealth Secretariat many years ago. I have a daughter who works out in New York, remote in Barbados right now. So I understand that. But what bothers me is, can't we find competent people amongst ourselves? Yes, we just let go one who was immediately taken up by another regional country. Okay, I don't know her skills, and I'm not touting anything for her. I don't have any bones to pick for her. But I'm sure there are many competent people in this country who can lead the tourist drive. What will a man coming, I think, from Netherlands, being paid a salary of $240,000 per annum, company car, gratuity, 20% gratuity when you finish, with an option a 3-year contract with an option to renew. Your utilities you pay, housing, the whole works. I am not so sure that we are ready for this, and I'm sure we have a lot of fodder for our president, our candidate for St. Lucie, Miss Verla de Pisa, to address this evening. Without any further ado, I want to welcome to the podium Miss Verla de Pisa, the current president of the Democratic Labour Party, our candidate for St. Lucie. And I don't want to be prophetic, but I hope we are right. The next representative for this country, whenever the next election is called. Madam President, thank you for addressing us.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, let me thank those of you who are here in person. We know that we have COVID restrictions, and we will honor and obey them whilst they remain in place. But we have many, many more online, and I want to thank you as well for coming here this evening, either in person or online, to hear what the Democratic Labour Party has to give as a new perspective, a new way of looking at how this country is managed. This is just the beginning of that conversation, because we were in response mode for a very long time, but we recognize, despite what the mouthings are from other sources, that we are on the other side of the 5-year term. We're in the bottom half of the 5-year term, and therefore we have to be preparing ourselves for an election whenever it is called. If it is called shortly, we must be ready. If it goes its term, we must be ready. That much is clear. And part of the getting ready is for our people to know what it is that we have on offer. But before I get to that national conversation, I want to have a word with the people of St. Lucie. First of all, thank you so very much for your hospitality as I canvass around the constituency. It is such a wonderful experience. It is a rare occasion that I leave a day of canvas and I don't have some sort of fruit or vegetable carrying home, because the gifts are coming straight from the heart, and I am forever grateful. Because the people of St. Lucie, despite all that has happened, they're essentially DLP country. And we intend to take it back. We've been in this moment before, when in 1981 we lost the seat as a party, but we made sure that we did all that was necessary by 1986 to get it back. And so, having lost it in 2018, you can ever bet we are doing all that we can to get it back whenever it is that elections are called. I have a committed team of canvassers. Some are here tonight, some are not. But you're welcome. You are free to join me every time. Because as we walk St. Lucie, it doesn't really matter where you come from. The complaint remains the same. We started in January, February last year, Tree Hill. We are currently over on the other side of St. Lucie in Checker Hall. And all in between has had the same complaint. Either there's no water coming through the taps, or the water that is coming through the taps is not fit for human consumption. All of the colors of the rainbow I have seen and experienced as I canvass St. Lucie, to the point where our people in St. Lucie pay the same high water bill that everybody else is paying, but they have to turn around and buy water to cook with and to drink. That is a travesty. And I'm not calling any names, but who's supposed to be looking out for their interests is making, as the old people would say, no riddance to speak to a solution to the problem. But for certain, whatever the solution is, there needs to be a redress for the people of St. Lucie having to pay a bill and then pay a bill. It is simply not fair. And tonight I am calling on the government of Barbados to meet the people of St. Lucie halfway, even if you cannot meet them all the way, and give them a rebate on their bills. This is the only fair thing for the people of St. Lucie. And when I tell you the whole of St. Lucie, I am not kidding. All the way around Holt Road, Northumberland, same story. You're going Greenwiches, you're going Crab Hill, it's the same story. All the way around, I have not yet met an area in St. Lucie that did not have water problems, but they get their water bills. And it is not right. It is not fair, and it must be addressed as a matter of urgency. I also want, on behalf of the people of St. Lucie, particularly those in the Holt Road area, to raise queries in relation to the development that is taking place at the Holt Plantation. Now, those of us in the know would remember that the Democratic Labour Party had that plantation earmarked for agricultural purposes, specifically research. But what we are seeing is roads being driven through. We're being told, no, they're not roads. But we know what a road looks like when it is under development. So we need to know what is going on in people's backyards, literally, whether there's a new housing development on prime agricultural lands. We need to be told what the development is. And common courtesy, if nothing else, would have you have a conversation with the people in the area if you are making any changes. So again, I'm calling on the government of Barbados to come and speak to the residents of Holt road so that they have an understanding as to what is happening in their neighborhood and to get a sense as to whether or not it will impact on their homes and their livelihoods, because some do work from home in that area. We need to have answers to those questions. And we know that there are other water problems around the country. I live in St. Thomas, and the water is off often. Our comrade Andre Worrell, he has spoken about the issues in St. John. So we know that there is a problem in Barbados with water sourcing. And it hurts my heart every time the rain falls to watch good water wash down the road, because we have not done anything to speak to water harvesting. New builds are being told to have water tanks to catch runoff, but no guidance or instructions as to what to do with it afterwards, when there should be some buyback system so that there's water available nationally. Instead, we buy water and bring it in and buy trucks to distribute the water when people have pipes running to their house that are either empty or of no use to them. It is time, it is high time that we stop talking about water problems in Barbados and actually do something to fix them. This is now an urgent action for the government. Because whilst all of these things are happening in Barbados, we have a prime minister who likes to travel. Yes. We have a prime minister who is constantly on the move. We know our history, not just Barbados's history, but history in general. And the expression that Nero fiddled whilst Rome burned comes to mind. It does not make sense to dress up pretty and go to town and everybody in the house hungry. Sometimes, just sometimes, home drums beat first. And we are in a crisis situation in the country, and that cannot be argued as long as a state of emergency remains in place. We are in a crisis situation in Barbados, and we need our leadership to be at the helm. This does not mean micromanaging everything that is going on, but it means taking stock of what is going on here and ensuring that solutions are not only found, but are implemented. But whilst all of this is going on, our prime minister is jet setting. I hear private jet setting around the world. And if that information is true, if there's a nugget of truth in it, then we need to know who's playing, who's paying for it. Is there any conflict of interest? We need to know these things. Especially when you raise them when you are in opposition. And then you come and you do the same thing that you were quarreling about. But this time, because of the significant and serious crisis that our country is in, we not only ask for answers, but we demand them at this stage. And I really don't know how to speak to COVID without a tear coming to my eye. We get these updates daily. And at the end of them, it says the minister offers condolences to the family and friends, to the point where it has become not only an empty phrase, but it has become a disturbing phrase, because it only makes sense if I can see you doing something to fix the problem. But I am slowly slowly, because I don't want to believe it, slowly coming to the conclusion that the present administration has decided that we could afford to lose some lives. But for the Democratic Labour Party, every life is precious. Our people are not statistics. Each one of those casualties has family, has friends, had dependents and loved ones. And we are losing the plot if we are okay with the situation that we are in right now in relation to COVID. And I know that there are some that would say, oh, you're in opposition, so it is easy for you to talk. And there are others that would say, you don't have to say a word because you are in opposition. But that has never been the concept of governance under the Democratic Labour Party. It has always been that our people are at the forefront of our thoughts. And it has never been an empty mantra for the Democratic Labour Party when we say that we are more than an economy, we are a society as well. And there are some who would browbeat that statement and say that we are anti-business. But nowhere in that statement says that we are only about the society. It is the cautionary tale that we bear, that you cannot only focus on economic issues, but that there has to be a balancing. And when you get to the point where the loss of life is so significant that it is almost 5 of our people, whether they are nationals or non-nationals, they are ours. Almost 5 a day losing their lives. Then it is time to take stock and take a different direction. It is time for a brand new perspective. When we have reached the point where our medical team can call on us to pray because there is nothing else medically that they can do to fix the country, we know that, again, as the old people would say, "I grandmother raised it, forgive me, we ain't guts." That is where we are at. So when we hear about home isolation and home quarantine, which I do believe are imperatives, they don't have a choice right now. They don't have a choice. This was not the plan. This is where we're at. But when we have home isolation numbers that are north of 3,000, and we don't know how many more are in quarantine, but we know that for each positive, there are at least 2 persons who are contact traced. And there are entire affected households. You cannot convince me that there is not already a negative economic impact coming out of that social situation. And it is because the two are so inextricably intertwined with each other that you cannot have a conversation about one without having a conversation about the other. So when we have one of our spokespersons stand up and speak to the business side of the COVID situation, and we have another stand up and speak to the health side of the situation, we will hear that they're not speaking the same words. But the fact of the matter is that we have to take all of those factors into consideration, find some synthesis, some balance between the two, come to a solution and move forward with it. We need to be very much aware that there is not only an economic issue in this country, there is also a social issue. And between the two of them, there is looming disaster if we do not stand up, stiffen our backs, and do what is necessary to fix it. Because that is what governance is. It is making those hard calls. Ask Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford. He was pilloried in the moment, but nothing but national gratitude for him after. Because if all you are doing from, not even from May 2018, from January of 2008 until the present, if all you are doing is counting votes, if that remains your focus, then you will continually have out of your vision, not even in your peripheral vision, not only the people, but you will also be doing a disservice to business. Because you cannot tell me that with upwards of 3,000 of our citizens in isolation and even more in quarantine, that there is not a negative impact on productivity in businesses in Barbados at this time. You cannot tell me with entire households in isolation, entire households in quarantine, you cannot make me believe that there is not already a cash flow problem in households. So you cannot in any way be speaking to safe zones and mandatory vaccination, because basically that is what you are speaking of when you talk about safe zones in that manner and at this time. Because a safe zone will never make sense when you barely scraping 50% vaccination, where you have half the country on one side and half the country on the other side, and the only thing you could be thinking about is to divide and rule. That cannot be the focus of any serious progressive government in this country. There has to be a time before there is a day of reckoning. You cannot wait until that moment, because then it is too late. There has to be a time when we stand up for our country and say enough is enough. We must take measures to fix the quagmire that we are in. So all the shouting down that we will endure, because we are constantly saying that you need to have a firmer grip on restrictions in this country, is in the same breath to be shouting down the doctors, because they are calling for the same thing. To be putting down the Democratic Labour Party, because we are saying that you cannot mandate vaccines at a time like this, particularly hooking it on people's jobs. You cannot mandate vaccines in any form or any type of wording when you yourself are out there, oh my goodness, on the black market sourcing vaccines, or so it seems. I can't wait for the defense to be filed. Because what it suggests is that even if a mandate were in place, the government is not in a position to uphold its end of the bargain by having that supply of vaccines to allow all who qualify to be vaccinated in a timely manner. And so we are having all of these airy-fairy notions that we are borrowing from other places, but without any concept of how they apply in Barbados. If you check any of the examples around the world, and I will tell you, go and look at Canada, You don't get to the point of safe zones before you have upwards of 75% already vaccinated. You can't have that conversation at 50%. And I will pause and say this. When I was studying politics, we had to do statistics. It was compulsory. And the textbook was called How to Lie with Statistics. I kid you not. If you go on Amazon, you will find it. So when you hear people talking or numbers that you know that you can't see reflected in any statistical document that you pick up and look at, talking about 60% vaccinated, when you can see the data in front of you saying something completely different, we barely scrape past 50%. We are not at a position where we can be having any of that conversation. And we have that low uptake now. The numbers that we see suggest that maybe, given the 8 weeks plus 2, maybe by December, January, there could be some uptick, but we still will not be in a range where we can be having that sort of conversation. And it is just simply flightiness to be mentioning it at this stage and trying to strong arm people. That is what it looks like. But we have a situation in Barbados where we have that level of engagement with vaccines on top of runaway COVID in our community. This is the moment when we need to take stock of where we are. Stop pretending that vaccines will fix any and everything that is wrong with COVID. We need to be putting measures in place now. A vaccine is a medium to long-term plan. We need to be putting measures in place now to curb the spread. If for no other reason than the very clear and present danger of our healthcare system on the verge of collapse. How can we think that this is an untoward conversation for this time? How is it that you are so mindful of X's in a box at this stage rather than doing what is right and proper for the people of Barbados? And the thing is that the measures don't have to be as draconian as a lockdown or a pause or whatever cute phrase they choose to come up with, because they're very, very good at catchphrases. Action and implementation is a whole next nother story. But the prolonging of this COVID spike, and every graph that I research shows only an upward trajectory of COVID cases and COVID deaths. We are in the record books, the COVID record books, for the wrong reasons. And I love my country, so I can say those harsh things because I know that at the end of the day, the benefit to my people will be significant. And when I say my people, I don't only mean the flesh and blood people, but whether the business community wants to believe it or not, getting a handle on this community spread helps them too. And the earlier we set about the business of righting this wrong, the better we can have a Christmas. And I will tell you, you haven't seen my draft document, but it is called Saving Santa. Because you know that we are on the cusp of winter, one of the biggest commercial and social seasons in this country. I'm not talking tourist industry. I am talking how Barbadians live their lives. Pull the whole house down, brand new set of curtains. The sofa got in a hole. I want another set. Let Bajans doll up themselves for Christmas in the park. There is no greater incentive than this very moment that we are standing in to speak to Barbadians about the things that we need to do together to get a handle on this COVID crisis. And as I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to come in that harsh sense of a lockdown in the way that we experienced it before. But imagine the benefits to both business and persons if, let's just pick one, the supermarkets were allowed to open 24/7, because part of the problem is congestion by cutting hours.
Very much so.
And then with the management of numbers going in, because you now can pick your moment to shop, we could be curbing movement with a simple thing like that. Just one idea. Just one idea. But it calls for something more than the usual thinking to deal with something more than the usual crisis. We need to be bringing our minds to bear. But when I say that, it must always be within the parameters drawn for us, the political class, by the medical and scientific class. This is their moment in time, not ours. And the mistake that Barbados has made under this administration has been to politicize COVID to the point where the doctors and the scientists are shouted down on a regular. It was back in August when the UE scientists told us about 500 cases per day. And the government must have scoffed, because that did not move them to action. But now that we are upwards of 300 a day, all of a sudden it doesn't seem like a fairy tale. But before it gets to the projection of the 500 is the time for action. And comrades, that moment is right here, right now, today, to fix that issue. Because when I do my maths, if someone takes the vaccine tomorrow and waits the 8 weeks and gets their second and then 2 weeks, we are at Christmas. And it has to be that we find ways of dangling carrots instead of wielding sticks. Because this Democratic Labour Party spent a fortune educating generations. Our people can think. Our people can reason. Our people can understand. And our people must not be spoken to in any condescending manner, and then you expect that they're going to march like soldiers to the beat of your drum. That is not how it works. If we have reasoned conversation like the Democratic Labour Party has been doing since February of this year. I earlier saw Comrade Paul. He was our spokesperson on health and a part of that Sunday roast. When we thought it was best to stop our usual programming and deal with the education surrounding vaccines, because we recognize that our people just want to know. And if you keep bringing in policies that create an us and them, you are pitting them against each other. You are not putting them to help work with each other for the betterment of this country. But I don't know that there's a man alive in Barbados who can say that what we're doing right now is what is working. And if it is that what we're doing now is not working, then the time to fix it is right now. It doesn't have to be exercised in any strenuous and hurtful way. There are ways to fix it, but one of the ways has got to be that we take protocols seriously at the border. It is one thing to be complaining and goading and threatening Barbadians about the keeping of COVID protocols in here, when the protocols are fluffed at the border, because nothing that we are exercising, calling protocols at the border, meets WHO standards, meets the standards of our BAMP, meets the standards of the scientists at UE. So it doesn't really matter how many times you say that you are following the science, if what you are really doing is turning a deaf ear to what the scientists have to say. And that is the position that we find ourselves in Barbados, where this present administration is concerned. A tone deafness. I don't even know if that is a word. Refusing to hear. I get the same voice notes that you do, and I hear the fear and the terror in the voices of our people. And they are in that state because instead of stooping to conquer, there is a big stick coming down on the heads of our people, and they are putting themselves in defensive mode to fight right back. We need those containment measures, whatsoever they look like. I only gave one example. Whatsoever they look like, we cannot have any serious and reasoned conversation about COVID and where we are at today, and then prepare ourselves to continue as though nothing is happening around us. I say again, Nero is fiddling whilst Rome is burning. Once we have the targeted containment measures, and let me be specific. If we say that a particular supermarket can only have 100 persons in it at a time, but we widen the hours that people can go in, all right? If we have those sort of targeted containment measures starting now, we have a greater chance of breaking this cycle of transmission, because we're talking about a lot of things that are medium and long-term plans. But I am not hearing anything to do with the immediate suffering of our people today, yesterday, burying their families, they think, because they cannot, for health reasons, see them. Those of us who have been through the grieving process know that closure is important. our loved ones. And I say it like that because I want us to understand and appreciate that even if it is not happening in our homes, it is happening in the home next to us. It is happening in the home down the village. And all of us feel its impact. So when our loved ones are dying a horrible death from the sound of it, alone, and then in reclaiming their remains, we cannot say goodbye in a meaningful way. If that is not your trigger to fix where we're at, I don't know that you will ever get it. Our people are not a set of statistics to trundle out on a daily basis, followed with our condolences to the family when we know you don't mean it. It ain't even cut and paste. It just left there at the bottom of the notice every time because you don't know somebody has died today. And we keep talking about this in a romantic way, but just imagine if we got e-commerce working properly. And the thing is, during that first lockdown, we saw that it didn't take very long for e-commerce to get set up. Very few, if any, let's just pick the restaurant and supermarket sectors. Very few of them offered online purchases before COVID. And see how fast their stock got online for us to be able to order online during the lockdown. But as soon as we opened back up, there was an easing away from that. We need to make that the way we do business going forward. And starting now, so that when we hear about and believe me, these are numbers that I am just using for example, when we hear about the 100 in the supermarkets, that it need not be you if you have the capability to make your order online. We need to make e-commerce standard. And it is not an area that Barbadians are unfamiliar with. If you could talk Amazon and eBay, Bajans know about e-commerce. There will be some amongst us who must go to the supermarket, and that is why theirs will be the priority for entry, because the rest of us can do something different and ought to alleviate a national problem. That is what it means when we say that we are all in this together. We're giving way to those who can't do better. And we have all of these different incentives. I will just take one more angle. I am hearing that the CXC students, the one that they take in fifth form, not CAPE, CSEC. All of this came after me. The CSEC students who took physical education, because they could not complete the physical component, the practical component, are ungraded. One single example of the disadvantage to our students. So if your motivation before was not there, then for some of us, the motivation will be that our children's education is compromised. And I wouldn't put it like how Dr. Ida Mae Denny put it, because I can think of no worse way to sell anything at all than to send a 4 to 7 year old with a message. We've all had those, my teacher said messages come home, all right? hardly ever straight anyhow. We've been there. There could be no worse way to sell a concept than through children who tell a story in their own sweet way. We love them for it, but we also know the limitations of it. But having a compromised education system is setting this country up for issues later on in life, not just social issues, but the ability to meet employability standards will also suffer. So if you don't have one motivation, if it isn't moving you, that our people are dying and suffering, then maybe, just maybe, our children's predicament will be the thing that galvanizes you to action. And for others, it may be a purely economic decision. And even that can be addressed. Because as I said earlier, there is no business that can make me believe that with a national absentee rate, because that is what it amounts to, a national absentee rate in the thousands at the same time, that productivity is not impacted. Especially if you have constantly to be juggling your workforce, because this integral worker is out and will be out for some indefinite period, and that integral worker has to be repositioned. That it has got to be an HR logistical nightmare out there. So if that is your motivation to fix it now, I can accept that. I can accept that. And those are just a few, because I could pick examples all around. But one thing that is abundantly clear is that for each one of us, there is some justification to get up and act now. And if it is that your present administration cannot feel your urgency, then you have a way to tell them what your urgency is and that you expect action now on COVID. It is not enough. It is not enough to come with concepts that can only work months down the road. How do we get there? How do we get there? We must. It is an imperative now that we actually be in this together. Not just mouthing it, but actually being it and standing up and doing it. The position of the Democratic Labour Party bears repeating. We are all for vaccination, but we recognize that you can't hold a person down and stick a needle in their arm either. We believe in education, and we understand that there is not just one way to reach people. They would not want to acknowledge it, but Comrade Andre Worrell first put into the atmosphere taking vaccines into the community. And I can tell you from my own experience canvassing that when we say take it into the community, we don't mean park it on a pasture and hope that people come. You need to be going and rapping on those doors, having not any and everybody, you know, these have to be medical practitioners, persons who can answer those questions. Because we got and we labeled people anti-vaxxers without recognizing that a lot of our people are simply hesitant. They want information first, and that cannot be a bad thing. but they have to get that information from the right source, because nature abhors a vacuum. And we have seen misinformation take over the COVID conversation in a significant way. And the hauling back of that cannot be with a stick. We need to get in there. And I will go one further. My daughter is in England studying, and she reports to me that you can buy COVID tests in the pharmacy. You don't have to line up in hot sun for hours and hours for a COVID test. She went to the pharmacy for her vaccine. It was a walk-in clinic, literally walk-in, because there was no line. The first pharmacy, when she went online and she checked, they didn't have the one that she wanted, and another pharmacy just short down the road did. She took the bus down to that other pharmacy, got her vaccine, and came along back home, because there are that many sites for getting the vaccine. But we have people lining up here in hot sun and passing out in the hot sun. And let me tell you, if anybody was standing up in a line yesterday or today, all right, these last 2 days have been unbearable with the heat. Not a blade of grass moving. We need to test, because that is the only way we are actually going to find where COVID is. The scientific data will give you ideas too, and that is fine. But we cannot be testing if the cost is prohibitive. And the cost will remain prohibitive, Comrade Kimar, if you have friends and family running the show. If only particular people and particular businesses can administer vaccines, I beg your pardon, administer the tests, you're going to have that backup. Free up the tests. People will take it. People take all kinds of tests over the counter. People will take it. They just don't like being sick either. Remove the mystique from COVID, the same way we had to do with AIDS, so that people will come forward. That too is an issue. And I say all of this, and I am not finished speaking, but I don't want to overwhelm with information. But we need to have this move past the point of conversation. We need to be insisting now on action, and action at this point in time, not some point in the future, not with any programs that can't work right now. Stand up for your right. And it is your right, Barbados. It is your right to be healthy. And if your health care system cannot cope, and I'm not just talking we cannot cope with COVID, our health system cannot cope with COVID. But what that means is that there's no manpower left for anything else. And I don't really want to get into this conversation, but we also have it backwards, because we know of a certainty that COVID eats at your Achilles heel. Whatever your weak point is, that is where COVID attacks. And we are a country that is plagued with NCDs, and we know that COVID attacks NCDs. But never have I ever heard this government with a policy to address NCDs in this COVID climate. And all of those are strategies for arresting the spread that we have. Not just about opening up the country to tourists who want to come, vaccinated or unvaccinated, because our protocols allow both, and then expect vaccinated conditions in Barbados. It is more than that. This is the health of the nation literally at stake. And you cannot kick this can any further down the road. We are not in government, but the Democratic Labour Party will forever have our people at heart. And hard calls are not hard to make when it is coming from a place of love. We are yet again in our history at a time of hard calls. And if the right hand is not on the wheel, and it cannot be a hand that rants off on the radio, that is not how leadership operates. It cannot be any other time like this time for a steady hand and a level head. That is your right, Barbados. Stand up and demand it. Thank you.
I was told online that I am not following the protocols, so I have to get the optics right by doing what is right, because we have always been very careful what we as a opposition party. I'm sure you want to give our candidate for St. Lucie, Madam President, another round of applause. And you will agree with me that she was fired up. I'm sorry that we can't go very long, because I still think there is the COVID protocol in place that say that we must finish by a certain time. I want to thank you, Madam President, for raising some telling issues. I've been taking copious notes. I hope when the gong is called that we will be able to reference some of them so that we can support you in your bid to be the next duly elected representative for this constituency. I have one announcement to make. From the Young Democrats. The Young Democrats has been very supportive, very community oriented, and very supportive of initiatives in and across Barbados. There's a breast cancer. Event that is coming up. I think Sandra, you had a leaflet, but it has been advertised on our website. Shakwani, you want to come? You want to stand and say something, or you want me to say more? Huh?
Hi, good night, everybody. My name is Shakwani Hunt. I can leave it on. My name is Shakwani Hunt, the president of the Young Democrats. I just want to let everyone, thank you. I just want to let everyone know and remind the persons who know already that on the 23rd of October at George Street Auditorium, we have a breast screening unit with the Breast Cancer Society. It is starting at 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. You can pre-register by contacting us via email. Our email address is youngdemocrats246 at gmail, or messaging us on WhatsApp at 823-8946. What will be happening is that the unit would be there. You will be having a manual examination, and they will be educating you on breast cancer and self-examination. Thank you very much, everybody.
I just want to say from here, I welcome those who were online and those who were in person. And now that I've come down and checked my phone, I learned that there's a watch party at headquarters. The group at headquarters. So thanks to them as well.
Right. So we want to thank all of you for coming. We want to thank all our online supporters for listening in. Because in normal circumstances, we would have our speakers answer any queries or comments, but because of the circumstances, we will forego this exercise. I don't know if there's anything else that anybody want me to raise at this time before we bring this event to a close. Yeah, we want to thank Kimar for coming from the city. We hope this will not be